Hello, this is the Overcoming Resistance podcast, and I'm your host, Louis Carell. Today we have friend of the show, Michael Salazar, joining us once again. My co-host, Sean Mahoney, will not be available on this episode. On this episode, we are talking about training for women and how that can differ from men. Michael has extensive experience with both men and women clients in his coaching practice. With more and more women entering into the physique and strength training world, we think it's important to highlight some key concepts to help them build muscle optimally. With most of the information available focused on men, we hope to play our part in closing the gap. We hope you to enjoy today's episode. Thank you for listening. Hey, Mike. Thanks for coming back on the show, man. I appreciate it. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing good. A little better. I got sick this past week. It feels like something's going around. I had like 3 or 4 clients get sick too, but now I'm back to pretty much 100%. First time missing a week of training in like a couple of years. So that kind of sucked, but I took this week as sort of intro week, sort of reacclimation. Like I was actually posted about that because I think it can be a little discouraging sometimes when people have to take an extended time off due to illness or injury or even a kind of lengthy vacation where they can't train. And that first week, performance is going to be significantly down in a lot of cases, but we know that's just a temporary reduction in performance. So just kind of getting back in the groove of things.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you got sick, man. You didn't get tested for the dreaded thing. I'm assuming it was probably just some
Uh,
shorthand
I
and
I
good to
don't know what
go.
it was, but yeah, I feel fine now.
Yeah. It's going around. My girlfriend got something recently too. It's just
Oh,
kind of, and it's that time of year, man, especially because things in the world opening back up, everybody's coming back into their normal lives, more human
exactly.
interaction, right? It's just,
Yeah,
eh.
I never get sick too, so hopefully it'll be another like 2 years when I don't have to do training.
You're too sanitized now. You
Yeah.
don't have that immune system anymore. But yeah, I mean, and definitely, and, a nice aside, the kind of sharing that, yeah, when people have time off, there can be a slight change in performance, but, just intro week. So for anyone that has to do that, you get sick or something comes up, or hey, it's just the holidays, life's busy, you're out of town, vacations. Yeah, the research tends to point, I think you would agree that, for young people who are pretty active, you're not going to lose a whole lot in a week or two
No,
of
nothing.
anything real. But yeah, your
Exactly.
performance, because you're just not training, you don't have that skill set, it's almost like you're
Exactly.
depracticed slightly, even if it's bodybuilding training versus powerlifting, there's just a slight
Skill aspect.
neurological
Hmm.
that you lose. And so it's always good that when you're, a little layoff, come back in, maybe start a little bit easier, and then just kind of ramp yourself back to your normal.
Exactly, and it's almost kind of funny how quickly that kind of strength comes back. Because I know I use probably like, I don't know, maybe 60%, 65% of the loads that I would normally use, even in like an earlier week where my RIRs are like three RIR or something, like even that, like, but I know, like, watch, if we looked at my log next week, it's probably going to be, add 60, 70 pounds every lift as I reacclimatize.
Yeah, and you're probably a little more sore too, and so taking it a little bit easier helps ease back into that, so you're not walking around just like
Exactly.
stiff and crippled.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I'm glad to hear you're doing better. You're getting back to it.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
none of your athletes had any major competitions or any
No.
major, hopefully it was all off
Yeah.
season downtime for them.
Yeah. Everyone's pretty healthy that's competing. I got a number of powerlifters competing pretty soon, so I'm excited about that.
Awesome. And that kind of actually segues a little bit. I'm assuming some of you got a mix, some men and women
Yep,
clients
yes,
doing
sir.
various things. And so,
Absolutely.
one thing I appreciate about you, and especially your clientele, your business, is that you actually have a healthy mix of both men and women
Hmm.
among your clientele, which, for a lot of coaches, they tend to lean one way or the other. So it's pretty unique that you have a pretty good sizable amount of both, which means that you probably have some good experience with the differences that can be seen
Hmm.
between the different genders, which is why I wanted to have you on. Because most of my personal experience and my co-host Sean, who's not on this episode with us, we've helped a lot of male trainees. That's where a lot of our experience is, your firsthand
Mhm.
experience, obviously, as well. Not that I don't have some familiarity with female trainees and their needs, but by no means do I have as much as you. So
Yeah.
you're definitely superseding us. So I'm glad that you were able to make it, and so we could have this conversation. So, with that being said, when you're looking at your clients over this time that you've had the varying genders and you've had so many to work with, have you noticed any kind of like big picture differences on the whole that you've seen? You're like, man, if I'm making a new program for a guy versus a girl, it's a power lifter, bodybuilder, they have physique goals, strength goals. You kind of have a general template you're going to run, and are there pretty noticeable differences that you would start with for a guy versus a girl?
I would say that in general, there aren't huge differences, but like some things that I've noticed is women tend to tolerate a little bit more volume, a little bit higher frequency they can recover from. And I don't know if that's due to any sort of physiological differences. My theory is just the absolute loads are not going to be as high. You see, it's not uncommon at all for women to get high frequency benching 3, 4, 5 times. I don't use like super high frequency benching in my own programming, but it's not uncommon to see in the powerlifting world. And I know I would be destroyed by benching 4+ times a week. I mean, possibly, some people can recover fine, but I think in that case where you're getting a female who maybe the absolute loads are a bit more limited, um, she's able to recover a little quickly from more quickly from bench session to bench session, and just overall volume. And kind of funny, I think that in terms of proximity to failure, I think women tend to recover more quickly from sets a little bit closer to failure, whereas some men I've noticed, and this is also sort of structure dependent, can have like a very quick rate to fatigue. I have some individuals who, I have two particular powerlifters who their amount of absolute deadlift volume is actually quite low, and our back off work is very low percentage. Anything above that, and their fatigue escalates very, very quickly. So, yeah, I would say women tend to handle a little bit more volume, a little bit more frequency, and
Basically we lost you just for a second. And so you were saying that, you were giving an overview of some of the big things that you notice. And you mentioned that for, women trainees, you notice that they can, on average, handle a higher training frequency, and they
mhm.
can handle a little bit more training volume. And then what were you trying to say right after that? You were segueing into something.
Oh, yeah. So I think they can also handle a little bit more proximity to failure,
Mhm.
and higher percentages relative to like an estimated 1 rep max. And that also may be structure dependent. I have some male athletes who can't tolerate a lot of training close to failure, or like their main heavy work has to be relatively low in volume, and we might accrue volume via other movements. Like for example, I have some guys where we'll maybe do just a couple sets of heavy deadlift a week, or maybe even just one top heavy set of deadlift with some light back offs, and we might accumulate volume via something like a back extension that's not going to be as fatiguing. I don't see this issue as much, nearly as much with women. So I think that just the maybe the structure of most women and the absolute loads that they can handle allow them to train a little bit closer to failure and at higher percentages.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with my limited experience, I've definitely seen similar trends
Hmm.
among, various, women versus male trainees. So I've definitely seen some of those differences. And like you said, it could be structure dependent. It could be the way that maybe some of those muscles connect and the way those forces go through the tissues. Obviously, I would also very much agree that I think absolute load has to do with the difference, right? If you
Yeah.
have a 120 pound, girl, and she's benching 95 pounds for most of her work sets, what's that percentage weight relative to her body weight that she's moving, right? Where if you have
Hmm.
a male trainee who's like 200, but most of his work sets on bench are in the low 300s, that
Hmm.
percentage, that absolute on the person is much higher. And I think there was some recent research, kind of showing maybe something mechanistic. We'd have to see more, that it seems like for guys, when they start to do, especially more higher rep training, the way the muscle contracts, it actually seems to constrict. I don't know if you've seen this on the blood vessels. And so it
Um,
almost creates like an occlusion effect.
okay.
So that, as the blood's coming in, the metabolites are accumulating. They're not getting flushed out because of the way the muscle is contracting. But for
Mhm.
girls, there seems to be almost like a pulsing, like a pulsatile effect. So they are getting
Yeah.
some outward flux. So that
Okay.
might explain what you see with them being able to handle heavier percentages, getting closer to absolute, failure without having that same detriment on their performance in pre next sets, because they're almost like flushing out the metabolites and some of that stuff that does contribute as they're doing the set.
Okay.
Where for biologically guys, it seems that like, hey, we gotta wait our turn. We gotta
Yeah.
wait it out for everything to get out. And so that is different, especially if, I definitely like the mechanistic stuff personally. When you think about what contributes to like muscle damage for people that don't know, we have like calcium's a major contracting ion in the muscle. When we're lifting weights, a lot of that calcium's coming in, it's building up and it's contributing to those contractions. And then as the muscle gets close to failure, that keeps increasing and that starts to accumulate a lot of damage on the fibers. And if that's flowing out, that would mean that as you approach failure as a guy or as a girl, you're actually accumulating less muscle damage per set, maybe,
Mhm.
than a guy. Like we're actually getting more physical damage, which then carries into each set, even if you wait a long time between rest periods. Because you probably see these differences in performance, even if you tell your athletes, hey, with strength is a main goal, performance, rest, at least 2 minutes, probably 3 to 5, right? Somewhere in there.
Exactly. Mhm.
And you probably still see these big differences
Oh,
in
for sure.
performance. So there's some mechanisms that might explain that. Yeah, there's some differences. Plus, not trying to go off on a tangent, but of course there's hormonal differences too,
Hmm.
right? That can't be ignored. Estrogen is a major hormone that actually helps prevent muscle damage,
Hmm.
and has a lot of effects on the mitochondria and producing energy. So there are probably some biological differences explaining these global things that you're seeing pan out in the real world. Because what we don't know always with mechanisms is, does the
Yeah.
mechanism matter for
Hmm.
the populations, right, in the real world?
Exactly. And that's kind of what research does. It sort of helps elucidate some of these minutia, whereas, in the real world, we're just kind of observing these trends.
But just to kind of put like a bottle, like a cork in that bottle, it wouldn't have mattered if we had all this data showing all these potential differences between men and women, if in the real world on training programs you pretty much see the same things apply. Like none of that
Yeah.
matters, right? So it's cool that we're seeing the differences in the populations, and we're also seeing maybe why those differences are there. Which then means that when, if a guy's listening to this or a girl's listening to this, then there's going to be some differences in how you approach these, training, how you might approach your personal training, especially when you're filtering information. But, we
Yeah.
spent a little bit of time talking about, well, okay, there's these differences. What may be going on with these differences? Why are these differences being seen? But I'm sure you've seen plenty of similarities too. So what would be some of those big similarities you've noticed?
I would say that overall program design isn't going to be dramatically different. So, excuse me, we want to have sufficient volume, which that can differ from person to person. We want to have sufficient proximity to failure. We want to have a frequency that allows us to train um, enough. I will say the biggest area where I kind of want to close the gap is in changing the female mindset. Because I think a lot of times novice or intermediate female lifters come at it from a maybe exposure to social media where they see people doing like sets of four, or like I'm sorry, like 4 or 5 sets of 10 to 15, and you look at these sets from these figures in social media, and the RIRs are like 5 plus RIR, and everyone can has a different tolerable volume, but I think that women often shortchange themselves in how close to failure they can train. And so we've discussed this before, that as you grow more lean tissue, you want your strength to trend up over time. So if you're sticking with the same weight forever, you're not getting sufficient stimulus to create those adaptations. So I don't know if it's sort of a societal norm thing, or women just have this aspect of okay, this is how women are supposed to train, where everything is, maybe the execution is fantastic, their control and tempo is wonderful, but the effort is just not really there. So I really try to close that gap and be like, hey, like let's get strong, and let's focus on getting those numbers to trend up over time on your RDLs, on your hip thrusts, on your Bulgarian split squats, et cetera, et cetera. So that training close to failure, that doesn't change regardless of gender.
From the sounds of it, you're saying on the big picture for guys and girls, a lot of the big pillars that we've talked about before kind of stand. You need to have sufficient training volume for the muscles you want to grow. You need to train, frequently enough that you can allocate that volume appropriately within your training week or training, microcycle, to stimulate that muscle for optimal growth. And then, of course, you need to maintain that appropriate level of proximity to failure to ensure that you're achieving the best muscle building stimulus per set. You're saying all that stuff still applies. There might be some minor differences in what muscles are trained, how frequently they're trained, and some of the different things. But, I do like that you pointed out that even though, as people that are in the science, we can see these big pillars are the same. You're saying that even though that's there, one of your personal goals is to help close the education gap, because it just seems that it's still common in the communication that's out there for girls that they just need to use lighter weights. They're training far away from failure. They're not really maximizing these big things. And I would agree with you. I think there might be something societal, something that's been carried on for a long time. I know for when I was growing up and getting into lifting, a lot of the girls would talk about toning, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was a word
Yep.
we always heard. I'm sure some of the newer people entering, it's probably a better field. It's still not perfect. There's still a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
education to be had, but it's much better than it was, because
Excuse me.
I remember it was all about toning, and the girls would lift the light weights and they're like, well, I don't want to get too big. I don't want to get too bulky, because they associated getting stronger, lifting more weight, doing all these things with,
Yeah.
oh, but you're going to get so bulky, you're going to get so big. And, the thing I've always said about that is I've been trying to get too big
Exactly.
for a long time. And it's pretty rare that you're going to just wake up one day and go, man, I got too big. I didn't see it
Yeah,
coming.
exactly.
It blindsided me. If most girls don't have the capacity to build crazy amounts of muscle. And if you do, you're going to see it. You're going to make a lot of progress, and you're going to probably hit wherever you want to end up pretty quickly if you have those magic genetics. And then you can just ease off the gas. You don't have to keep pushing, but you do need to, like you're saying, I agree. We need to push that performance. If your goal is to build muscle wherever that muscle is, that's the only way it's going to happen. You're not going to do it, if you started with an RDL, Romanian deadlift of 50, and you got up to 90, but you still have goals to build your glutes and hamstrings beyond what 90 pounds is provided you,
Capable.
that
Yeah.
progression. You got to keep getting stronger, right? You're not going
Exactly.
to get too big. And if
And
you're getting
that's,
too big for your preference, you're going to see it ahead of time,
yeah.
and you can
And it,
ease off. Or,
yeah.
you can work with a coach that can help you assess and guide and maybe make modifications to achieve, like yourself, right? I'm sure you have plenty
Mhm.
of female clients, especially ones competing, right?
Mhm.
Who have, those competitive categories have distinct looks. So if
Exactly.
you see something getting out of line, you have that objective eye to be that feedback loop, being like, hey, we should ease up here. We should take some volume off, right? Having that
Yeah.
experience to kind of help them shape
Yeah,
the
and that's,
that they're
a
going
good
for.
example of that would be like a bikini athlete, where we want some upper body development, obviously, but they don't want these girls to have like, huge shoulders and traps or anything. So a lot of that volume allocation starts to skew once you have sort of a decent base. Of course, that volume allocation starts to get skewed more towards the development of hamstrings, quads, and glutes. And once the hamstrings and quads are to a certain point, you end up in a spot which is very common for bikini girls, where your volume allocation is very heavily skewed towards glutes. And then everything else is more at sort of a maintenance volume, or like a just above maintenance volume, where you still kind of want to grow that tissue a little bit, but you're preferentially like really attacking the shit out of growing the glutes. But I think that what you said about like not getting too big, especially due to their hormones, are not going to be able to build that tissue unless they're like a genetic freak. You might have some rare woman that, maybe due to like differences in her hormones or muscle fiber type, she's going to grow, at a fast rate and get really, really strong. But on average, women, they shouldn't fear training close to failure because they're not going to be that jacked. And I think one thing that can kind of get conflated, and I see this right now, for example, in the physique community, is women sometimes maybe they're carrying a little bit more body fat. And as they put on some lean tissue, they think that they're bigger than they are. And I'm like, if you actually got really, really lean, you would realize you have way less muscle than you think. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the wellness category.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is something we've been observing recently, sort of on an amateur level, where the gap between pros and amateurs is so massive because you get these girls that are just getting into it. It's a very attractive class because it's like, okay, kind of like the similar body type, and the upper body is a bikini girl, maybe a little bit bigger, but obviously the lower body development is much, much, much further along. But what you see happen, and I see this every show I've been to recently, where girls that maybe hold a little bit more body fat in that region naturally are like, oh, like I've got enough tissue, I've got thick legs and a big butt. And what happens is they either don't get lean enough, or if in the rare case locally, if they do get lean enough, you realize like, oh, you didn't have nearly enough muscle. So I would say, like, if you're trying to build that type of lean tissue, it's just going to take a long time, and it's going to take some really, really hard training for a long time. And this, anyone who diets down, chances are you have less muscle than you think you did.
Yeah, I know personally all too well as I become lighter and lighter like a feather. Um, approaching high school body weights and being like, what happened?
Right.
But what you're making a good point though about them getting, or I like the point you made about them maybe having a little bit more body fat. This goes for guys and girls, but having a little bit
Absolutely.
more body fat and then building some muscle and being like, whoa, my muscles are getting too big. Well, what may be happening is you have maybe where you hold the body fat, right? So if we use women as an example, a lot of girls hold a lot of adipose tissue in the hips and the
Hmm.
glutes and the legs. So if they start lifting and those muscles start to get bigger, then it's going to only look like they're like, whoa, they're getting huge. But most people, right? I'm assuming most of your clients have body recomposition goals. It's
Exactly.
pretty rare somebody's like, I only want to build muscle
Yeah,
or I only want to lose body fat. They generally want to do both. And
exactly.
so as that body fat comes down, as you said, a lot of people realize they're like, whoa, I don't have nearly as much muscle, especially because apparently I didn't know this until recently, but some of our body fat will be stored in our muscles.
Yeah.
So not
Hmm.
only is it, outside of the muscle underneath the skin or underneath our organs, but there's some in the muscle. So even as you lose body fat, the muscle physically will be smaller because it has less fat in between
Yeah.
the
Those
fibers.
intramuscular triglycerides.
Yeah. So you have, this component where, if your goal is recomposition, guy, girl, don't be afraid to put on that extra tissue. You might go through a period where you're like, oh, my legs feel too big.
Hmm.
But once you start to lose some of that body fat, you'll probably be very happy that you had that
Exactly.
extra actual muscle contractile
Excuse me.
tissue present. So don't shy away from trying to build the muscles you want to build, unless you're happy with your body fat percentage. Then
Yeah.
then we're just talking about a look, and a lot of these nuances kind of wash away. But
Hmm. Yeah, and I would
definitely.
say that if someone is happy with their look and they're just looking to maintain that, then you don't have to try to push like super close to failure. Like if you're just going into the gym because it makes you feel good. It's good for your physical and mental health, and you're fine just doing the same routine and for the most part the same weights. That's perfectly okay. But this conversation we're having, we're obviously talking about people who want to build more lean tissue, and if your goal is to grow more, then you have to get uncomfortable. You have to push hard, and you have to push close to failure. And for women, I would say you're not as jacked as you think you are. And like I said, going back to the whole wellness thing, I have some girls that are very interested in it, and I'm building out these kind of long-term timelines, because I'm like, you just need a lot of time to build that tissue. It's not impossible, but it's not going to happen in 4 months. We're looking at a year and a half, 2 years to build that kind of lean tissue. And a lot of girls that have maybe that sort of fortunate adipose tissue distribution, obviously it looks good, but if we're talking in the perspective of just building tissue, once that adipose tissue comes off, you realize there's not as much lean tissue. So I always say, like, a lot of these girls doing wellness, you should have just dieted longer and done bikini, because that's kind of the muscular development that you have. You just happen to hold more body fat in your legs and glutes.
I totally agree. I think that there's definitely some misconceptions about the way body fat's such an illusion, the way it
Oh,
can be
for sure.
stored and held and what it can do, for a competitive athlete like you're mentioning, or even just the general population too. I mean, this could go, we could get off on a pretty major tangent when you start talking about the way body fat redistributes, guys try, the guys all over the internet trying to just get abs, and that
Oh
might be
yeah.
15% body fat for one guy and that might be 8% for another guy based on
Oh
where the
yeah.
body fat holds, and maybe some of the unrealistic aspects of maintaining that type of look long term for health. But maybe we can have you back on. We can dive deep into
Okay.
some of that illusion. But so pretty cool that we got off on that side topic of just kind of encouraging, especially female trainees, like don't be afraid to put on some muscle. And like you said, if you're serious about your body composition goals, you're going to have to go through uncomfortable periods. And I think that might even be able to be extended, in my opinion, to, let's say you have a little more body fat than you want and it distributes to areas that are favorable, like the glutes and hips, but you want to build more lean tissue, but you also want to lose more body fat. So if you lose weight, some of that adipose is going to come off. Those legs are going to get smaller. But let's say you're not in a dieting phase, you're in a mass building phase. You might have to be okay with your legs being a little bit bigger in general than you
Exactly.
want to be,
Hmm.
as you put on the tissue you want to put, and then you strip off the body fat to get the end look that you want, even for
Exactly.
a more general trainee. So it's not just the competitive athletes that need to be considerate of how much tissue is there under the body fat. General trainees too, I'm sure you run into, where they're like, no, my legs are good. And you're like, yeah, but as soon as we lose 15 pounds, you're going to be unhappy. So we got to put the muscle on now because we're not
Exactly.
dieting. So when you get there, you're happy with the end result. You don't just feel like you wasted away because you didn't really lose muscle. Like you're saying, a lot of people think they're losing muscle,
Hmm.
where no, you just didn't have the muscle to begin with. It's an illusion.
Exactly. And I think that, not to go on a tangent here, but I think that fears over losing muscle in a caloric deficit are probably overstated. I think as long as you're training hard and you have sufficient protein, there's a good chance you're going to keep the majority of your muscle if you're not in like some sort of ridiculous deficit or doing like an insane amount of cardio. As long as it's well managed, like, you're going to keep most of that muscle. So like what you said, is it's most often a case of people don't have as much muscle as they think they did. um, I mean, you can even see cases of people doing like protein sparing modified fasts and pulling off a lot of body fat in a short period of time, and they don't really seem to lose much lean tissue.
I mean, even if we extend even that concept, you're talking about the protein sparing modified fast. For those that don't know, it's pretty much you're going to hit like the quote unquote research optimal for protein
Hmm.
and nothing else. There's only trace carbs, trace fats. It's pretty
Hmm.
much you're doing a fast, but with protein for the purpose of muscle, protein synthesis stimulus and maintaining that signal. But I mean, even if you look at the intermittent fasting research, where they have people only eat 3 meals a day, but it's in a short window, so they're not getting all that protein spaced out evenly, which we could say from a mechanistic standpoint probably isn't as optimal.
Hmm.
But you see the same I mean, even at 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you see similar results for building muscle, losing body fat, muscle retention. I mean, I would agree with you. I think it's a bigger concern than it needs to be until you're doing a competition. If you're trying to be on stage, maybe we could agree that
Yeah,
during the end of a prep, that very competitive, maybe those nuances become major impactors. But for
exactly.
a general population, I mean, I would agree it's probably a worry that doesn't need to really be there as much as it is. And if you're noticing a lot of muscle changes quickly, but you're training hard and your performance is still pretty good, it's probably a loss of water, probably a decrease
Exactly.
in glycogen, which is that
Hmm.
stored carbohydrate, and maybe even a little bit, if you are losing body fat quickly, it could, like we talked about, could be some of that fat inside the muscle.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the way you hold your body fat gave a nice illusion. So even the stuff that's outside the muscle,
Exactly.
that's really what's changing quickly. It's not usually a loss of tissue. But I think while we haven't spent as much time on the specifics of men versus women, I think it's good that we spend a lot of time talking about the psychological, because no
Oh, for
matter
sure.
what you tell someone, especially in today's climate, it's getting better, like we said, but it's still a problem. The education doesn't matter how much you tell them, like, oh, here's the layout, here's the best things with research. If they can't get over the mental hurdle of accepting an implementation,
Hmm.
not much matters, right? I mean,
Exactly. And that's the thing. I've run into that issue with female clients before where they uh they wanted to stick to that sort of old mindset of, it has to be really light, it has to be super duper controlled, it has to be, 30 set leg day. I would never program a 30 set leg day. And so the female clients I've had a lot of success with is because we've been able to create that sort of buy-in of like, hey, let's get you really strong. I often take sort of even if they're just physique oriented, a top set and back offs approach where we're ramping up to like one heavy set, and we play around with the RIRs on that. But over time, every training block we want to get stronger and stronger, and I really want to teach these girls. It's easier for men to buy into this, but I'm trying to get all my females to buy into, like, I want to be celebrating what my body can do. And if your performance is trending up over time, that's going to reflect in your body composition goals as well. Whereas if you're only focused on body composition and you're not actually training hard, chances are you're probably not going to see the same results.
yeah, and we did touch on this in the last episode, but I think it's worth repeating. There is some research showing that people that focus on what they look like, it might contribute to some not so healthy patterns with exercise and eating, because you're not, like you said, you're not
Exactly.
appreciating what the body can do. You're only focused on what am I doing to get this look, which, if you got body composition goals, that's not bad. If you got
Hmm.
competitive physique goals, that's not bad. I'm
Yeah,
not saying either of that, and I don't think you are either, but it's that this is a long game. There's going to be
exactly.
periods where you're not going to look exactly the way you want to look, whether it's because it's the holidays and you're enjoying more food with family, if you're a general, trainee,
Hmm.
or if it's, off season and as an athlete and it's time to build some muscle, or, whatever that situation is, you're probably going to have periods where the physique isn't, you're not going to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and go, this is the look. There are
Yeah,
going to have to be periods away from that. But how do you navigate that if all you care about is the look? Like you said, you're probably not going to get good results because you're probably not going to make any progress because you're going to restrict your eating. You're not going to train.
exactly.
You're just not going to do the things that are uncomfortable that you need to do to make that progress. And so
Hmm.
focusing on performance gets you out of that. It gets you into
Yeah.
a realm of, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not as lean as I want to be. But hey, my squat, my hip thrust, my leg press, my Bulgarian split
100%.
squats, they're all going up. I'm getting stronger. I feel stronger. So, okay, so I'm probably building my legs, I'm building my glutes, as a
Exactly.
girl, as a girl might be having this narrative. And then when it's time to diet down, then oh my man, I'm way further along. I look so much better, right? Until you hit that physique where you just want to maintain, like we've talked about, which is a different discussion. But if your goal is to make some type of progress, you would agree, right? There's periods
Yeah,
where you're not going to have maybe the
100%.
physique that you want right that moment, but how do you keep the buy-in? And so it's all on that.
Yeah, I think
Performance becomes
I
the big
think
one.
I think that's super crucial in that sort of off-season setting for, like, say a bikini girl or a wellness girl where, maybe they diet down and do a show and they look good, they're happy with how lean they got. But then going into the off season, you're going to be a little bit softer. And so having that emphasis on training performance, I think, is a big psychological win, and a very positive vector. Whereas maybe someone doesn't have that buy-in to training hard, and they're just kind of spinning their wheels. So now they don't have that psychological boost of like, oh, I'm getting really strong, but they are getting softer. And I think that can lead to sort more quickly binge and restrict cycles, uh, depression, exacerbated eating disorders, et cetera, et cetera. And like those are things that have to be navigated carefully regardless. But I think if you are having that buy-in to focus on training performance, I think it makes the process a lot more rewarding, where they know like, okay, I'm definitely going to have bigger glutes and bigger legs on stage next season because I added 50 pounds to my squat set of 8. I added 40 pounds to my RDLs set of 10, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would agree. And we can extend that to general clients too, because
Absolutely,
a
yeah.
general client, that girl wants to build up her legs and her glutes, right? She's got to build those muscles. Probably a
Mhm.
caloric surplus is going to most likely be the best scenario to do that in.
Absolutely.
So she might not have the physique she wants long term for that brief period to build the muscles that she wants long term. It's all the same conversation. For those that don't compete, I think it's more like a bar, right? I mean, the general population is probably here, and then the physique competitor probably pushes the bounds a little bit to the ends further than
Exactly.
what the general, but the same ideas will apply. You're not always going to look the way you want. And I will say too, there's some upsides to having those softer periods, the higher calories, focusing on performance, because it's a long game. Lifting is a long game. You got to do it for a long time to either build the physique you want or maintain the physique you want, right? And I don't know, it can be tough if you're restricting your calories, trying to stay really lean, but let's say that person is also bought into performance. Well, it's really hard to make performance when you're really restricting your food.
Exactly.
And that might lead to some burnout, right? So we're still talking about this psychological potential drawback to not allowing everything to flow in unison, where you can't have yourself, oh, I'm going to be 100, and let's say you're a girl, I'm 130 pounds, that's the body weight that associates with the look I like, and so I restrict my food to keep that. But your goal is to also increase your performance to build more muscle. You're probably not going to build more muscle if you're maintaining that weight and restricting your food, and you're probably not going to have much more performance. Having those conflicts and those goals consistently clashing, that can be tough mentally too,
Yeah, and
right?
I think that's a good point, because maybe having that focus on performance allows women to psychologically allow themselves to eat a little bit more and be like, okay, this calorie surplus is good for me. Maybe what I'll do sometimes, if we're in a good spot body composition wise, is whether we're doing macros or a meal plan, I might have, give someone a free meal. That way they feel less restricted. And so, we're maybe in one case, a girl may not want to take that free meal because she's worried like, oh, am I getting too chunky? She may look at it like, oh, you know what? I got to train legs tomorrow. I got heavy RDLs. Let me go out for sushi tonight. And these carbs and proteins and healthy fats are going to help build, help training performance and help build more lean tissue. That way she's not as focused on like, oh, I got to get, say, super small, super lean. Because like you said, if you're always trying to stay on the smaller, leaner side, that training performance is not going to trend up over time.
Yeah. So, and all this can apply to guys too, right? I don't want the listeners that are men to not understand that, like, yeah, this applies to you too,
Yeah.
especially with the current narrative of gym talk and being super ripped. And this
Yeah, that's
applies to you
true.
guys too, not just the girls out there. But I think we're focusing on it. And I could say, because the narrative, right? The narrative for guys is a little bit more accepting on average of getting a little bit thicker and all this stuff. And then for
Hmm.
girls, it's usually the opposite, unfortunately. And so I think it's good to focus on that stigma, because I mean, what are we really talking about? If a girl takes an average training program for a beginner that's maybe focused for guys, what does she do? Switch the exercises more to the muscle groups she want, maybe train them a little bit more volume on each of those exercises, and then maybe she can find out if she recovers well, maybe she can do a little more frequent.
Hmm.
those aren't huge differences, right? We're not talking about a night and day. We're just talking about a moving of the needle,
Exactly.
but it's the buy-in to accept that type of training and that type of layout and what needs to
Absolutely.
be done over the years to build the physique that they really want. And I think that's, really, really good that we spent some time on it. But I kind of wanted to ask you two quick questions. I think would be
Sure.
fun, kind of like quick takeaways. And one I have, because there's a lot of guys who are either getting into training, female clients, or there's a lot of guys who train with their girlfriends, or they help them, or their family members, but they only know what guys respond to. They only know their own personal training. So,
Yeah.
what is one thing that you think most men should know about women trainees that they don't? Like, what's that big one that when you have conversations, you're like, man, you need to understand this.
I guess there's a couple. Like, first of all, obviously, I've said this already a bunch, that women can train closer to failure than they can think. So, like, if you're training a woman or your girlfriend or whatnot, I definitely encourage them to really push their limits. Because, like I said, and this is not just women, but I just see it a lot more commonly with women, where they'll stop at, like, what's supposed to be a 1 RIR, they'll stop at like 4 or 5 RIR, or even more than that. And I think sometimes people just need to learn the skill of training to failure. And so it may benefit women to train a little bit closer to failure for a period, maybe even to failure more often. And then once they learn that skill, then they kind of know how to learn RIR, learn how to rate that RIR better. And then another component I would say that is important to note is that, um, being being a little bit more, I guess, positive reinforcement. I think that, and I don't want to say like women are soft or anything, but I think that women tend to respond a little bit more better from a psychological standpoint to that positive reinforcement, even if they had like an off day or something, highlighting like, hey, like you did this better, or maybe your strength was down today, but your execution, your form is looking better than it ever has, stuff like that. So I think that it may be a little bit more easy for females to get in their head about things, and so having that sort of positive reinforcement is a big help. And you'd be surprised, like I've heard from some people that come to me and their coaches, like, they don't even like talk to them. They don't say shit. And to me that's just like the bare minimum, but I had a lot of clients that are like, wow, like you're really encouraging, and like you're invested in my long-term development and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's my job.
Yeah, it's the whole reason you're a coach, ideally. Uh,
Exactly.
right? I mean, coaching isn't just a spreadsheet with numbers. There's an emotional guiding, educating element, right?
Mhm.
That goes into that whole process. I mean, it's a partnership. It's really not just you
Exactly.
taking over the reins. It's two people coming together for one person, one person's goals. But okay, so no, I think that's great, kind of focusing on some of the rehashing a little bit of what we talked about earlier, but just kind of, hey, if you're a guy and you're not sure where to start, like these are some big things that you just need to take on board mentally. And
Yeah.
then I think we've really, and then my other question was going to be, what do you think most women trainees should know that they don't? And I think we really talked a lot about that psychology and that buy-in that,
Yeah.
you got to train hard, you got to be a little uncomfortable, you got to push, you got to get stronger, you got to move some weights, get close to
Exactly.
failure, and maybe spend some time eating a little bit more food and getting out of those comfort zones of like, oh, I don't want to get too big or too bulky, right? It's you got to push, and unless you have really good genetics, you're not going to just wake up one day and be like, oh man, too big.
Exactly.
Snuck up
Yeah.
on me. I didn't know it was going to happen.
Exactly. And it's funny because I think women may see like, I don't know, they'll take like a very tiny percentage example of like, I don't know, like a enhanced female bodybuilder, and think that that's what they're gonna look like. And it's like, first of all, that lady's been training for like 10 years, and she's obviously on supplementation. You're not gonna look like that training for 6 months naturally. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So
Yeah. Definitely not. And if anything, if you train really hard for 6 months, you'll probably be much happier with the way you look, as
Exactly.
opposed to being like, whoa, I don't know about this. But
100%.
yeah, so definitely. And then, one thing I did want to ask you about, because you do have so many female clients, and, I don't know how much you go into their history, but there's been a lot of research coming out looking at like contraceptives and cycles and, the menstrual cycle and how some of
Mhm.
that impacts performance.
Yeah.
Is that something that maybe some women should be prepared for, some of that differences, right? Because if they're on a contraceptive, they don't really have a cycle. Their
Yeah.
training seems to be, based on the research, a little more static, a little more
Yeah.
uniform. The
Mhm.
performance is more consistent because with the menstrual cycle, for the guys that maybe aren't as familiar, it's a changing in the hormonal aspects that women have as they go through whatever their monthly, because it may not always be a perfect month cycle
Yeah.
is. And so, hormones impact performance, they
Mhm.
impact mood, they impact how we feel. So, for those girls that aren't on the contraceptives, that they have their monthly cycle, they go through those natural fluctuations. Do you program or see changes in performances over that cycle that you kind of consider?
I definitely see it, but I don't program for it. It's one of those things where the way that I program, I build in the ability to auto regulate. So I kind of put that in their hands. So if it's coming up on and they're on their cycle and they're feeling a little shittier, that RPE or RIR, maybe they're just gonna have to go a little bit lighter because they are feeling shitty. And so I like to auto like allow people the ability to auto regulate because some days training performance may be really high, some days training performance might be a bit lower, and so the ability to auto regulate just allows you to account for those day-to-day fluctuations.
Okay, yeah, I think that's great, right? Kind of have your plan, and then you allow the natural fluctuations, whether it's food, sleep, stress, or a monthly cycle, to play
Yep.
out as they're going to play out, because it's maybe not always uniform, but it is something that maybe female trainees or guys helping women should be prepared for, that if they are not on contraceptives, they have a cycle. Don't be shocked if maybe when they're starting to get to those, the week before or the week
Mhm.
of the period, that maybe some performance changes start to really occur,
Yep.
and then maybe they report feeling run down. And that's
Exactly.
nothing wrong maybe with the program, that's maybe not
No.
an
Yeah.
issue inherently, it's
Totally
just
normal.
you got hormone changes. It can be shocking. Someone gets in their training groove, and a girl's getting into it and she's making progress, and all of a sudden that first cycle hits her really hard, and she's like, what happened? I lost all
Yeah.
this performance. And you're like, well, your hormones are changing. Like, you're
Yeah.
strong enough now, and you're progressed enough now, that these types of changes impact you. They impact your performance. They impact the way
Exactly.
you
And
do
like
things.
one thing I would say to people in general when it comes to those day-to-day fluctuations in performance is we're all going to have those days where you come in and you feel like Superman, but excuse me, just like we have those days, we also have days where you come in and you feel shitty. And it's not necessarily about trying to raise that ceiling as much. I mean, we are trying to raise that performance ceiling, but I think about it more so as let's try to raise that floor. So in the future, across 6 months, someone's kind of off day, we can look back and be like, this is an off day for you when this used to be like your max 6 months ago. So that like the average of your performance is trending up over time. It's not every day that you're gonna PR and feel like a monster in the gym, but over time we want to see that performance trend up. And so your floor is getting higher and higher.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's also a good segue for anyone listening, guy, girl, that, when you're focused on performance, one of the things that can come up as a drawback, as you're saying, is you get caught up in the highlights. You
Mm-hmm.
get caught up in the ceilings, the top of
Yep.
those performances, and you have those lower, and then you have, low, but you're saying you're trying to raise the average, the base.
Exactly.
And so, if you're focused on performance, we both agree it's fantastic. You should be. It's a pillar. It's something that keeps you in the game a long time. keeps you on the, you know, one of those more healthy mind tracks. You're focused on the process, not just the outcome. You're focused on, you know, doing enjoying the trajectory up, but don't just focus only on the highlights too. You really want to raise that the median. You really want to raise everything. You know, the good and bad days over time are all trending up.
Yeah,
So, you know, you can create mental wins, like you're saying. So, oh, we had a bad day, but man, look at this bad day compared to what used to be your good days, right?
exactly.
Those mental wins you're reframing. And, you know, the same thing goes for body weights, right? Like, oh, you had, you know, don't focus on just when you ate, you know, Chinese food and drink a bunch of water the night before. And don't just focus on when you forgot to eat dinner.
Yeah.
You know, those outliers, focus on the median and, you know, where your weight's going up or down based on your
Exactly.
goal. So I think that's a good point, and one I don't think it's talked about enough
Hmm.
in these more psychological conversations of, hey, you might need to reframe things to find those wins where they can be.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, very good point. Now I know you're a science guy. I see all those fancy degrees behind you. For the people listening, this guy's got all his accolades posted, and I've got, you know, anime posters. Uh, so you could tell the difference in, you know, our priorities. But for the science guy you are, you know, one thing that comes when you're an evidence-based coach, as you are, you're
Hmm.
probably looking at research, right? You're focusing on, you're reading studies, you're keeping up with research reviews. You probably had a lot of that when you were in school as well.
Oh, for sure.
One thing that's come kind of to the attention of a lot of those that follow the evidence is that there seems to be a pretty big discrepancy between the research done on men versus the quantity of research done on women.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what that ends up doing to the field, is it kind of puts us in a place where we have to dissect, well, what studies on guys? There's this big body of research, but it's pretty much all done on men. Does this generalize to women? You know, can we just, you know, for those that are looking at the research and the evidence and listening to people talking about it, can they kind of just like take these results and just kind of like put them towards, you know, the different gender? You know, and are there some, maybe some topics where no, there's enough difference here between the outcomes that, you know, you probably want to pay attention to if guys or girls were in the study group.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So you've seen these differences and you're aware, you're a science guy. I've seen them. So are there some research topics that you personally, when you're looking at them, you're not so concerned if the study group's guy or girls? Like, hey, you're reading a body of literature on this topic, and you think these results pretty much apply over. You know, are there some that, so for those that are listening, and before I let you talk, I'm sorry. This is important for you to consider. If you are managing your own journey, you're a coach, you're going to probably want to read research. You're probably going to want to look at studies. You're probably listening to people talking about this stuff. And it's good to know, if you learn something new, does this apply to me based on my gender right now? Or is this not for me? I need to go look elsewhere. So that's kind of the application I'm trying to distill down to. So, you know, topics that you find in research that are done mainly on men, you know, which ones do you feel like, yeah, we can apply those to girls at the moment?
I think like when it comes to just like general hypertrophy, um, we have to understand that, we're not particularly different from like a structural standpoint. And so I would say that like, for example, like some of the biomechanics stuff and things like that, it's pretty easy to sort of generalize across genders. And where I would like to see more research would be, and maybe this is just my personal bias, would be kind of examining like the ability to tolerate higher frequencies and higher proximities to failure because of what we talked about earlier. I'd love to see some research on like, okay, how frequently can women train to failure versus men?
Mm,
Just because we have observed, and not just myself but other coaches have observed women able to tolerate these higher percentages and proximities to failure. So is that, like we said, because of absolute load? Is it because of specific biological differences? But I think on a general standpoint, I think most research tends to elucidate things for both genders. I would just like to see like more niche things to try to quantify like what I said, like differences in ability to tolerate volumes. And one thing that's tricky too is because most of this research, and I've seen it start to get better, but a lot of this research is done on untrained individuals, or like how they define trained is like someone who just goes to the gym for the past year or so. So it would be interesting to see more literature, not just for women, but men as well, on individuals who are a very high level already. So, maybe I've seen this done where there'll be like, men who squat 1.5 times their body weight or 2 times their body weight. And that's kind of the prerequisite for being a part of the study, which is a lot better than just like quantifying someone as a trained individual who just goes to their college gym twice a week and kind of fucks around. So it would be interesting to see, some higher level females be studied, but it's also tricky because how many high level athletes are just going to let some masters in exercise science nerd run their programming for them when they're trying to compete in either powerlifting or physique sports or something like that. Like, I know personally I wouldn't hand over my training to a student in a lab. So that's kind of where it gets tricky. So we have to sort of take some of that data and not take it with a grain of salt, try to grab some of the general ideas and see how we can apply it to the real world. But there's definitely a gap there still, and I think there always will be somewhat of a gap.
I agree. With the last point, especially because you're really dealing with that. I agree. There's not enough research on the people that are 5+ years into it, very experienced, and something that is known for both genders is that as you train, your response to training and what kind of moves the needle for you forward diminishes. So things need to become more specific because every percentage point of advantage matters. When you're a beginner, you kind of, I've even seen studies where they've seen muscles grow on a bi-weekly training frequency. That is
Yeah.
once every 2 weeks. Okay. I mean, that's so different than what a general trainee who's been training for a couple of years would need. And then where's now the gap is, well, what does somebody who's 5+ years really need, right? That's what you're kind of
Exactly.
saying is there is this different spectrum of how the body responds. It gets more resistant the further and further we move from the baseline, which is where you started. Right, we're
Exactly.
moving us as you're moving yourself as an organism along the spectrum
Hmm.
further away from baseline, so the body resists that pull away from baseline as you go. So what needs to be done needs to be different. And you said, yeah, there's training on people that are called resistance trained, and as you pointed out, well, what does that mean? Well, you got to read the study. Some of them are okay and pretty good with like performance metrics, and other ones are like, yeah, they've been lifting weights casually for a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're the college kids that just go into the gym and at least like their key card scans.
Yeah.
Um, there's a big difference between what those are. And then even untrained, right? There's a big difference between what might move the needle for an untrained person versus a highly trained. So I think that's a great point for both genders. But I do agree that a lot of, like you said, the big picture stuff for building muscle, generally you can take it from guys and apply it to girls. Like, oh, we should be training close to failure. You should be training the muscle, more as frequently as it probably can be trained and recover well. You want to use the amount of training volume that you can recover from, and then also that drives performance increases. Those are the general trends we saw from literature and guys. That seems to apply pretty well to girls. And then, you pointed out that there's only a few areas where you're like, oh, that population group really does seem to be, a difference. And that could even be said, if you're a girl looking at somebody talk about a study and they're like, hey, new meta-analysis, twice a week's the way to go. Well, if that whole body of literature is on guys, here
Yeah.
are one of those instances, right, where the research isn't there for girls, like you said, proximity to
Yeah.
failure and frequency. So maybe they need to take that personal experience better. They're like, well, I tend to make the best progress when I'm training my glutes 3 times a week. This study
Yeah.
says twice is best. Well, don't ignore that,
Yeah.
because that research might have been on guys, and you're different, you're a girl. Or, oh, this new study says, as an example, oh, if I'm 3 reps away from failure, that's the perfect moment. We don't have this study. It's not a real study. I want to clarify that. But let's say, there was like, oh, 3 to 4 reps from failure in guys maximizes muscle building, minimizes fatigue.
Yeah.
But if you're a girl, what if that same study in women would have showed 1 to 2, right?
Exactly.
That's the difference that you're talking about. Where, okay, big picture stuff, sure. But when we're getting into these specifics, specifically with
Yeah.
frequency and proximity failure, you're saying, hey, pay attention to that population group,
I
see
think
who
it's
was
important.
studied.
I think it's important to note that research speaks in generalities, and it's kind of the broader brushstrokes, if you will. And as you get more advanced, or you might encounter individuals as a coach who just have more unique needs, or more, a more unique approach to their training to kind of get the needle moving. Someone might need an approach to their program that is a little bit unconventional, or something you haven't really done before, but that's just what works to the individual. And that's one of those things that research can't find, is that practical experience. I remember when I first got into training thinking like, oh, I'm going to be fucking amazing, because I already had a bachelor's degree in sport and exercise science. And I can tell you, I would probably go back, and every single client that I had for the first 6 months as a trainer, I would probably do things differently. Because you get that practical experience, and okay, what works for this individual, not just from a programming perspective, but from a psychological perspective. Sometimes you may need to take an approach that's a little outside of what you would prefer to do, but for that individual, it keeps their buy-in high. If I have someone that comes to me and they really, really love high volume training, I'm not opposed to volume. I just would prefer to get the most out of the least. And like, obviously, depending on the setting, if we have more calories, we're in a growth phase, we can start to trend that volume up. We can start to use intensifiers, things like that. But if someone came to me and they're like, okay, I do everything 5 sets of 15, I would be like, all right, let's meet in the middle. Let's do like 3 sets of 8 to 12 or whatnot. And the one thing I would do is compromise on them on like, okay, like, we don't have to take the top set back off set approach that I use a lot for hypertrophy clients, but what we can do is just still track performance and allow that to trend up over time. And so if someone really is married to the 3 or 4 sets, okay, let's still keep these 3 or 4 sets, because that's what you're going to stick to and enjoy, but let's monitor that performance and allow it to trend up over time. Would it be my preferred way to do things? No, but you have to tailor things to the individual.
Yeah, and I think that's a good, side note for anyone that's thinking about coaching or working with people, is kind of what you're saying, where, we all have biases, right? Even as a personal, even if you're doing your own self coaching, right? You're training yourself. Everybody has biases based on what you've been taught, what you've learned, what your experiences are. And sometimes you're going to run into, maybe even for yourself, or like you said, for clients, where what's going to get them the best result or get you the best result might be something that does not fit the biases. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's a mark of a great coach, a coach that's willing to set aside what they personally think is right in the
Mhm.
interest of getting their client the best possible results, whatever that might look like on a piece of paper, because
Mhm.
that's really the goal, is to get the client the best results. And if that means you're looking at a piece of paper like, man, that's something I would never written off
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
blank sheet, but this is what works for them, let's do it. I think that's the mark of a great and experienced coach, and one that anyone looking for coaching, guy or girl, you should be looking for someone who's willing to do that. And I
Exactly.
also really appreciate that you don't ignore the psychology side, because it only matters what somebody is going to, as we said in the last episode, what really matters is what you're going to put effort towards and do over a long period of time, be
Mhm.
consistent with. And it doesn't matter, maybe like you said in your example, the 5 set of 15 person, maybe for them, they're not really making progress and their goal is progress, but they really love doing that workout. Well, there's a conflict. That's why they came to you as a coach. If they were
Yeah.
getting perfect results, they probably wouldn't have hired you.
Mhm.
And you're saying, well, hey, maybe we should try a little bit more intensity. Maybe we should try a closer proximity to failure. Maybe we should try a little less volume, because you're not doing as much fluff.
Yeah.
and maybe, maybe their optimal is at 3 sets, but you're saying, hey, I'm willing to come somewhere in that middle of 4 sets and kind of try to work to where, hey, we're moving that needle forward, maybe not as fast as we could, but
But
hey,
they're
at least the
buying
needle's
into
moving
it.
forward, but you
Yeah,
also are in buying it, you're into the
exactly.
program. And I think that's a great mark for any coach, guy, girl, if you're listening, this guy knows his stuff. Just check them
Thank you.
out. That's definitely a good mark. And if you're doing self-training, maybe you're like, hey, I'm not in the mood for a coach. You should be applying the same objectivity to yourself. My
Yep.
personal opinion, I don't know if you agree, but I do a lot of training by myself. It's for me. I manage it, but I kind of take a two model approach kind of for myself where the version of me that's writing the piece of paper, analyzing the training log, looking at the previous stuff, setting training for the next week is not the same person that's in the gym doing the work. I have
Exactly.
two different personalities that I carry in those moments,
Yeah.
basically. And so the version of me that's looking at the training log and the progress and what's on the paper, getting me the results I want, is looking at it from an objective view. What
Hmm.
is, biases aside, what's getting the results? Let's go there. And then the person that's in the gym, that's the person that's got to have the buy-in, got to do the stuff. And then so I'm trying to
Right.
marry the notes of the person in the gym to the version of me that's outside the gym looking at it. So for anyone that's training yourself, that's my personal model that I use for self-coaching to ensure that I'm not just like ending up in the cycle of doing what I like and making no progress because that's not fun. I don't know
Yeah.
about you. Do you have any advice for the listeners, guys or girls, about how they might manage it themselves if they're not hiring a great coach like yourself?
I think that's a good point. Having that objectivity, but also enjoying things, I think I said this last time we talked that, say, for example, I've been doing Romanian deadlifts or stiff leg deadlifts for hamstring and glute development for a while. And maybe I'm a little tired of that. And I may say, okay, let me throw in some actual, just normal conventional deadlifts. You could argue that's a little bit less optimal from a hypertrophy standpoint, but if I'm bought in and I'm like, oh man, let me see if I can work up to like a heavy set of 6 on conventional deadlifts and get up to something I've never done before over the course of a couple blocks, I think that juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I do like that point you made in the previous episode too, which is something that I've actually taken on personally, which comes even further. I'm a very big advocate for enjoyment, but one thing you said stuck with me for anyone listening, which was that I said like, oh yeah, you should probably consider changing exercises when they no longer create progress, right?
Hmm.
If all your other chest movements are going up, besides the barbell bench press, it might be time to swap out the barbell bench press. And then you said, well, yeah, that's good. But there's even moments where if I'm still making progress and I'm getting a little bored mentally, I'll swap it. So
Yeah,
you're doing it even before like the objective indicator says it's time to swap it. You're doing it
exactly.
based on more the psychology of the level of enjoyment that's there. And that's
Yep.
something I've taken on personally. And I think, is a great way to think about too, because it is an ebb and a flow.
Hmm. 100%.
So, I think we've given the listeners, both guys and girls, some good ideas about some of the big differences between men and women that can be seen in training, maybe some of the biology that's there, how maybe they can listen to some of the evidence that's out there that can be generally applied to either, or maybe some of the topics that maybe they do want to think about a little bit more before they just take whoever the next Instagram, TikTok star they listen to said about an abstract that they didn't read. Um, and they just apply it to themselves
Yeah,
and really
exactly.
talked about some of that psychology, and the buy-in and the really, that's really what moves the needle. Are there any other things that you kind of want to say on the topic of, girls building muscle,
I would just say that I want to hammer home the point that women are capable of more than they think. I've got a lot of incredibly strong girls on my team, and part of that is just creating that buy-in and allowing them to believe in themselves as much as I believe in them. And like I said previously, there's nothing wrong with going to the gym and just enjoying training for the sake of training. But if your goals are to go really far, whether it be in powerlifting or bikini or wellness or figure or whatnot, or you just want to keep improving your physique, then you are going to have to push yourself, and you are going to have to get uncomfortable and train close to failure and really get strong. And like, getting strong is fucking cool. Getting strong is beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Just, I think that's great. Great message. And just really pushing that point of, hey, you gotta see what the body's capable of. You got physique
Exactly.
goals. It takes effort. It takes time. It takes pushing
Yeah,
yourself outside the comfort zone. You got to go for it, and
exactly.
don't be afraid to get strong, because it's great when you can pick up stuff and move things and not be fragile.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I definitely appreciate you coming on, Mike. It was a great talk, and something I've wanted to have a conversation about since the beginning of the podcast, but I just didn't feel I was personally qualified enough on my own to speak about female trainees. So I'm glad that you were able to make some time come on. So for the listeners, I will link your stuff down below. But where's the main places people can find you?
Like I said before, mainly on Instagram at Michael Salazar 198. If you have any questions, you can DM me, coaching inquiries, stuff like that. Thanks for having me. It was a really good talk. I think it went really well.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And people check out his Instagram. He posts a lot of videos of his female clients, the ones that are getting strong, pushing
Mhm.
hard, training close to failure with good techniques. So
Exactly.
if you need examples, that's the place to go. Body transformations, recomposition, performance. I mean, he's got a lot of good client feedback on there. So you can see like the things he's talking about. What does this look like if you apply it for a couple years? Great
Exactly.
examples. Check it out. And if you're in need a coach, check him out.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating and review wherever you are listening, if you are listening to the audio-only version of this podcast. If on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please let us know if you did or didn't like the episode, and all feedback is helpful. We will be releasing another episode 2 weeks from now. You can find us at Overcoming Resistance on YouTube and at Overcoming_Resistance on Instagram. Have a great day and take care.